anchor, content creator and founder of social TV, Samm Marshall, chairs a fiery panel discussion with Earl Kopeledi, Head of Marketing for Sunglass Hut, Phumza Rengqe, Group Marketing Manager of Distel, Monica Newton, CEO of the National Arts Festival Makanda, Cleo Pokpas, Creative Entrepreneur, Mariapaola McGurk, Creative and Public Programs Coordinator at Conhill, and Playwright, Director, Dramaturge, Slindile Mthembu.
Guys, thank you very much for joining us in our Burning Question session. And today we want to deep dive into this idea that marketers and creatives, that there are mystical forces that keep you guys apart from each other. If you read the thousands and thousands, and if you Google marketers versus creatives, there are literally millions and millions of articles written by experts from different corners, different pockets of the world, and they're all weigh in on this subject. When you read this content, you almost feel as if you guys completely hate each other, and it's a West Side Story scenario where if you meet in the streets, there's a full-on war, and if you meet in the boardrooms. So today I want to deep dive. I want to understand, is it real? Does it exist? If it doesn't exist, where does it come from? And what does the stats say in terms of your relationship? So in the one half, we've got creatives. In the other half, we've got marketers. And before we deep dive into the subject matter, by way, and in the South African culture, you have to introduce yourself. So maybe if we could just very quickly introduce ourselves. And at my screen, and I know a lot of you have long, incredibly long CVs. Monica Newton is one of them. Mariapaola has won many awards. I know you guys are very, very famous in your spaces, but could we keep it in 15, 20 seconds, very quickly? Monica, can we do the ladies first? And then, sorry, gents, can we start with the ladies first and then move to the gents? Monica, starting with you.
Thank you very much. And hello to everybody. It's great to be on the panel. So I'm an old campaigner in the arts, and I've worked in a variety of different fields, in government, in parastatals, but I'm a newly minted CEO of a festival. I joined the National Arts Festival in 2020. So we are here to build bridges between creatives and marketers and try and be balanced, because that's what festivals are, is platforms for expression.
Mariapaola, can we go to you?
Hi, I'm Mariapaola McGurk. I'm a visual artist and currently am the Creative Programs Coordinator with developing the Creative Uprising Hub at Constitution Hill.
Slindile?
Hi, I'm Slindile Mthembu. I'm a playwright, director, theatre maker, and a researcher. And I focus on Black muted women playwrights. I'm here and I'm excited to be here to speak about how we can all center ourselves back into these spaces that marginalize us.
Phumza?
Hi, everybody. My name is Phumza Rengqe. I am a marketer. Started my career years ago in advertising and went over to the dark side of corporate, where I experienced much of the safety net. I do consider myself a creative / marketer. So looking forward to mending these bridges, as Monica said earlier. Thank you.
Interesting. Earl?
I am Earl Kopeledi, also a marketer by trade. Been in a marketing space for 20 plus years. Currently, I head up marketing for Sunglass Hut Retail in South Africa.
And then we're going to Cleo.
Hi there, guys. Cleo Pokpas. I'm a social entrepreneur, mainly focusing in the sports, arts, and culture space. I'm the founder of an organization called 3 Kilo Organization. Basically, what we do is we activate projects and we consult for sports, arts, and culture projects, obviously to try and create some sort of socio-economic change in this country that we all love.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. So let's start with this idea that marketers and creatives can't stand each other. Mariapaola, you've seen the question before. I'm sure you've thought about it. When I say marketers versus creatives, what comes to mind?
Well, from my perspective, it's true. And there's a big division between marketers and arts. And when I say arts, you have to be very clear, because advertising actually does fall within the creative economy. So advertising, animation, graphic design, and more commercialized fields within the creative economy are also within the broader sense of the arts. So when I say that there's a division, I'm specifically speaking about arts and culture and the sectors which fall within arts and culture. And the division is in intent. Arts and culture's intention is never to sell a product. So you have to acknowledge when a brand is sponsoring arts and culture, their intention is to uplift their product and to commercialize and do better in the sales of their product. And the artist, their intention is to get across a message and to relay critical thinking and dialogue. So to me, the first step is to acknowledge that there is a division, and the division is deep down in intention. And once we acknowledge that, we can start seeing ways that we can work together, even though there is different intention. Sometimes in clever ways, you can find ways that both organizations, the corporates or in this case, the marketer and the artist, can both be honest and true to their objectives, as well as pulling off a project that is successful in the interim. So from my perspective, the first part of this discussion is to acknowledge that they are not the same, and they aren't buddies. There is difference. There is difference in their reasoning for existing.
Just maybe, Monica, I see you nodding along to this conversation where Mariapaola is saying that the intent is critical, that there are differences, and that we must acknowledge those differences, but that's not where the story ends. If you read the articles and the content, it's that the fact that there is this intentional divide is in actual fact creating a problem between marketers and creatives. And it comes down to, for example, some of the things that Mariapaola has mentioned, but also in terms of how briefs are interpreted. Just maybe your initial reaction to Mariapaola?
Profound conflicts to some degree. But again, I don't think that those conflicts are unhealthy. I think they're a natural and intrinsic part of a creative process. And maybe the way forward is to actually see the exercise of marketing as the collaboration between artists and a platform like a festival or a brand. Because certainly what you do want to see is the notion that each side understands the difference between what the creative process is intending versus what an economic imperative or a sponsorship agreement or something may be looking for. And I think that the crux of the difference is perhaps about how those polemics are represented. I have no problem with conflict. I have no problem with gray areas. It's just, I think we need to be a little bit better at navigating those gray areas between each other. And I think that the other critical point that Mariapaola was also raising is that when we have an instrumentalist notion of the arts particularly, it's going to do this or it's going to do that, or we push this button and we get this response, that almost never happens. And it's in understanding how people relate and react to the art form and the product, I think is so important. And I think that Slindile's views, as she sort of introduced herself, is also talking then about the question of what we are not doing as platforms, as marketers, so because we're choosing to have a very narrow understanding of the polemic.
Slindile, because Monica mentioned you, are we choosing to have a narrow understanding?
I think it's more got to do with we don't understand as a collective how we can distribute the message together. And we also don't understand that the verses shouldn't be a thing of where we're fighting against each other. If we work with one another, we understand how to impact society. I think as an artist, my job is to impact society. And as a brand, I think your job is to reach a wider audience. And if we can balance our mediums together, there's a way that we can get more closer to the target market that we are both trying to reach to. And I think it's more got to do with understanding how we distribute all our strengths in one bag to get to the buyer who can buy into the product, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Just Slindile is talking about the role of the artist is to impact, and the role of the brand is to reach wider audiences. From a very layman's perspective, I thought brands, one of their jobs is also to try and impact society at large. Am I wrong, or is that the role of the artist?
No. I think you're 100% correct. I think I want to just take a step back before I get into that. I think the challenge is often marketers get grouped into one homogeneous group. We all think alike and we all operate alike, but it's not true. And I can't speak for artists, but when you look at the sphere of marketing that includes marketing research, strategy, digital, basic communication, above the line, it's such a massive piece of a function. And I think you'll find that there's sensitivities within marketing that veer sometimes more towards the, let's call it the accountant and the number crunchers. And then you have the more arty, sensitive marketers, for lack of a better word for that. And I think that becomes quite interesting, because that's where you sometimes find that people operate in a different way to one another. So that for me is the starting point. I think the impact, I 100% agree with you. We all are trying to achieve a goal. In my view, I would like to think that I'm a bit more sensitive to the artist side of things. And I believe marketing's core role is storyteller, right? It just happens to be that it's a storyteller with a more, I almost want to say, direct financial goal to it. But in essence, we're all fighting for the heart of the consumer, right? And so that's why I'm saying it's not as clear cut as black and white on this particular topic.
Phumza, before I go to Cleo, you by way of introduction you talked about joining the dark side in the corporate space. And maybe just kind of your reaction to the inputs from both Monica, Mariapaola, who started this conversation, and then kind of factoring in what Slindile was saying, and then how Earl is really talking about that. In actual fact, if you listen to Earl, that maybe the role of the creative, which is not necessarily an artist, but a creative within the corporate structure, within marketing, that maybe those roles are not too dissimilar in terms of what the objective is.
So Mariapaola's view I find difficult to digest, because I think using words like the words that sort of a language that separates us is already part and parcel of the problem. In my view, we are all part of a value chain, and it's a big value chain with a lot of nuts and bolts in it. And everybody's role is unique and different, but integral to the outcome, which is, as Earl said, to make an impact at the end of the day, to move society, to move consumers, to make a difference. So I think that the debate, especially when we are using language that separates and defines people according to you, either on this side or on that side, is certainly not helpful. I think we are also in spheres of influence that are constantly changing. Marketing as a discipline has changed. It's become more scientific. There are now sort of data analysts that underpin every decision that we make about who we distribute our messages out to, in what vehicle, what channel, and what is going to give us the desired outcome. So as a marketer, as a strategist, and as someone who's sensitive to the arts, I have that in the back of my mind. But I also know that the people that I'm trying to move towards a certain action or trying to influence are also not, they're quite smart. Consumers are evolved. And so I need the artist in its most authentic self to contribute to any objective that I'm trying to achieve for my brand. And I think it just doesn't help us to separate us and to sort of pitch ourselves on either side of we are part of one value chain, and we're all trying to achieve a goal that I think we all get something out of it at the end of the day, both marketers and creatives.
Mariapaola, did Phumza misunderstand your opening remarks about marketers versus creatives?
No.
Correct?
No, she didn't. She understood it and she disagrees, which I think is part of what this is about. So, I spent 7 years really trying to navigate and understand the corporate sector, ending in me doing an MBA and completely immersing myself in a world that I was very uncomfortable in. And I learned a great deal, but the one thing I did learn is that there are fundamental differences, and that has to be acknowledged. So in what you're saying, we're all part of the same value chain, we all have an objective. Yes, I agree to a point. But at the bottom line, when you have artists who actually often, not always, but often are anti-capitalism, are anti-consumerism, and your objective at the end of the day, through a range of methods, and like what Earl said, also trying to have an impact on society, at the end of the day, a business has to generate profit. That is what they fundamentally have to do. An artist needs income in order to do the work they need to do. So this tension has to exist. And I'm not saying that cannot lead to very positive connections and partnerships with one another. It often does. And I've worked on a range of projects of really trying to find those ways that you can connect and hold on to the ethos of both. But you cannot deny the reality that the intention of any large company that is not a social enterprise is to generate profits. And that often is fundamentally against what the intention of a creative is. So my point isn't that we can't have bridges. I think we absolutely can create bridges. But first we have to acknowledge that we're on two different sides often, and a bridge has to be very strategically placed in order for people to walk across. And it is possible. So I'm not denying that. But first, let's acknowledge that reality.
Cleo, should we acknowledge that there are fundamental differences that we need a bridge, or should we go with Phumza's version, where the very language we use could be divisive and could break down this idea that we should all be this group that in this value chain that have a role to play? So do you think language is a critical part in how we build these bridges? Or
no, 100%, Sam. I think what I want to say is I sort of wanted to stand up for Mariapola, because I think the creating those definitions is exactly what is required. The moment that we say let's be neutral about it, let's be all trying to reach the same objective, that's exactly the time when we start walking into this murky water. I think Earl mentioned how marketing's main objectives is to create these narratives, which I do agree with, because that's what they want to do. But I think the main objective actually is they need to ensure that they're selling a product, and they use these narratives to sell the product. And that's not a problem as well. I think we need to first look at the role of businesses in society, So if the main purpose is to sell the product, then let them sell the product. But then if they need these narratives that are going to come from the creatives, they need to acknowledge that this is where this other part is coming. So that's why I think Phumza's definition is it puts us into a little bit of a tricky situation. And we're always going to have these problems where marketing is maybe overstepping what they are doing or stepping on the artist's toes, and then vice versa. The artist, I think maybe the artist's focus never is to sell a product. They're creating a campaign. Ideally, what Phumza said is she'd love the artist to be as pure as possible. And when the artist is just there to create a story, whether to shock or to tell us a positive story or a sad story, that's only going to be achieved if the creative's mandate is to go create, not to worry about sales. And so we need to make sure those boundaries are understood And it's not offensive as well. I think the moment where we say we have creatives and we have marketers, the marketers tend to get insulted because now they're not seen as creatives, which I'm sure in their capacity, they are creatives, but within their business role, they perform now an administrative function where they need to ensure the bottom line of the business is achieved. So 100% I agree that those roles need to be understood for us to move forward and create better narratives for society so that we can move forward. I think from a creative's point of view, we understand 100% that business has the resources, the financial resources based on the profits that they've received to create these stories and to potentially push a new narrative forward for the country or for society. So yeah, I think each party needs to understand the definition and not so much stay in their lane, but understand the various roles that are required in these different situations and then move forward from there.
But just to follow up, Cleo, and I see Mariapaola put up a hand, you're saying that each player needs to almost have a sense of the role of the other player. But then at the same time, to Phumza's point, is that we need to keep the artist as pure as possible. How do we achieve an objective where like we've all started talking here, the business has an objective, but to Slindile's point was that her job as an artist is impact and the business is wider audience. But then Earl comes back and he says, no, but hold on, we've got the exact same opposition. Our job is also about impact. Our job is also to make sure that we also have an impact in society. How do we get to a place where we understand each other's roles if you want the artist to stay pure? And then I'm going to go to Mariapaola.
I think Earl's saying that he wants our objectives are the same. We both are aiming for impact. I think it's a marketing ploy where this is what marketers want to do. They say, this is what we are trying to do. We are going to give you a better life. Buy this product, which I don't think is. I'm not trying to make Earl out to sound evil or anything, but I think the problem essentially is that the impact that he speaks back, and I don't want to sound like a broken record and go back to money and profits, but the marketing role is to obviously ensure the sale of the profit. I think for the most part, it's potentially based on the fact that we have a bad business culture in society where businesses sit over here and it's about profit, and essentially businesses need to be brought back into a more functional role in society. Businesses obviously are very important, but it's not to create social awareness. I think if we need to be blunt about things, and based on from a definitions point of view, I think it's important for us to be blunt so that we can work better together. These awkward conversations are necessary because it helps us obviously forage and create a new path forward. But yeah, that's what I think about that.
Can I quickly bring in Mariapaola because you put up a hand, and then I want to go to Earl, but Slindile, I also want to get a comment from you. Phumza was shaking her head, disagreeing with Cleo. So if we can just quickly in that order, because we are going to soon run out of time. Mariapaola, your reaction.
Okay, so I just wanted to point out with what Cleo was saying. I've been pushing quite strongly about the development of the creative economy in South Africa. And it's quite a hard push, and it's quite difficult because even within the sector, people don't like to use the term. And the main reason I've heard that they don't like to use the term is they don't like creativity to be associated with the economy. And from lots of people's perspective, the creative sectors are not about economy. And so when I'm speaking, there are flaws there are pros and cons both sides. It's not that the marketers are the evil consuming monsters and the creatives are just these innocent, wonderful bystanders. There's complexities both sides. And if we look at what the creative economy is, there's room for a range of creatives. In the marketing departments and advertising departments are a lot of creatives doing work that falls within the definition of the creative economy. But that's not what we're talking about here. When marketers and advertisers want to engage with the arts and culture sector, often the message of the arts and culture sector, or that artist in particular, is exploited to the value of the brand. And that exploitation really fundamentally bothers me, because arts and culture is about a deeper look and intention within our society. It's analyzing the context of our society, and that's always critiquing. It's always challenging the times that we're in. That's part of the role of the artist. So when the artist is put in association with a brand trying to be popular or trying to popularize a new thing that they're launching, there is this automatic conflict, because that deep intention of the creative, of critically analyzing the society they're part of, cannot be upheld in its value in itself. It is only upheld in the value associated to that brand. So you start getting a society that no longer values arts and culture for its value in itself, and only values arts and culture when it is associated with a brand. So there's a deeper fundamental flaw in this connection of brands having to maintain that artists can generate an income. Our government and our society should be supporting this bigger, so that there isn't a hidden agenda of brand development behind the intention of the artist.
Oh, quick response. And there's two different points here from Mariapaola and from Cleo. Can you?
I'm going to catch them. First, I want to say I'm going to stop showing my hair because this Dr. Evil look is really not working for me. But what I want to say first to I guess to Cleo's point, I think we shouldn't forget that we all part of an economy, and even in art, you know, the idea of the struggling artist, that romantic thing. I mean, it's done. You know, everybody should create a sustainable, let's say, career. I agree with Mariapola on the support of arts and culture in general, from education upwards. I think it's shocking, and I actually think you put a panel together on the marketing side that's actually quite art swinging in their arguments. I think we should have had maybe more robust researchers and stuff on this for a better fight. So I'm not really going to pick these huge fights, because I do agree with a lot what she's saying. At the same time, I think there is an economy that exists even within the arts. You know, we're all selling a story, right, at the end of the day. So yes, I understand the pureness of the art and art for the sake of art, but people need to get fed. So the same way I would sell a pair of sunglasses, I'm a consumer of going to the movies or whatever. I'm a consumer, and we cut across both ways, right? At the end of the day, we're telling stories, and we then buying into that story for whatever reason. So that we can't escape the economy. We're all entrenched in it. I do agree, though, that there's a lot of hijacking that happens, because what is the next, what is the new coolest thing in the art space? Let me attach my brand. Whether there's synergy or not, it's not important, because all I'm looking for is the eyeballs, right? That definitely happens. I'm not going to defend marketing as a holistic industry and say that doesn't happen. It definitely happens. I think where artists maybe can be a bit more, and I have to choose my words well, discerning is who they get in bed with when it comes to brands, right? And making sure that, because there are good marketers out there that understand that connection and why it could work, and where the total is more than the sum of the parts. Because when it works, it really works. But that is when you create a win-win situation, and that doesn't always happen. So I think we must just, you know, I'm very sensitive of the two sectors or the two camps, because I think, yes, it exists in certain pockets, but it's not the standard narrative across everything.
Slindile?
It reminds me of last year. I think the pandemic had to teach me how to quickly reach an audience in terms of like an advertising format, and how I edit my work, and how I can impact that viewer to buy into buying a ticket. And it reminded me of how, when I reached a brand and I was like, listen, I've got a story that can fit to your hashtag, or that can fit to what you're trying to do in terms of what you're also trying to brand, and the message that you're also trying to send across. And I was like, okay, listen, I've shot like a 3-minute shorter version of the theater work, and now it looks like it could be like an ad. So how do we bring all our work, all our worlds together? Because I've got the message that we are all trying to get across, and all I need is you guys to attach the branding and to buy into the product, so we can reach an audience together. and it becomes a thing of like, there's levels to this thing. You can get to that door, then that door closes. Then you try to open that other door, but it shuts on you. And I think this is when brands now need to reach out to theater makers or to different people in different art sectors, fine artists, who are actually really killing the game right now and who are really selling incredible stories. But the only problem is we don't know how to market ourselves. We don't know how to get to the next level of it becoming an impactful work that can sit on a billboard, that can sit in an advertising campaign, and that can drive the message of how we can all come together as one in terms of, at the end of the day, buying a product that we sell together. And I think this is where that hybridity that needs to start coming into play between both worlds.
Phumza, before I go to Monica, who sits in both camps, she's a CEO now and comes from the creative background as well. But Phumza, just your reaction to Cleo's initial comment, Mariapaola then weighing in, and then almost I hear what Earl is saying, and then I hear what Slindile is saying, and for me, Slindile, what she's saying, and I still feel that between the four of them, there seems to be an idea that we're all sounding, we agree, but I don't, from an outside perspective, I don't think the four of you agree.
Look, I think it's not a conversation, and hopefully this is the first of many conversations to be had around this, because it's not something that we're going to crack in one talk like this. And I think the tensions exist, and the tensions have to exist, because you've got all these multi-layers of disciplines and expertise coming together to create magic, and that friction has to be there in order to create something that's worthwhile. This is all part of the process. I think that the point that's been made about artists and how artists are really unsupported is a very important one, and one that just needs more focus and conversation with the right people in the panel. And then lastly, Slindile, it's difficult from an artist's perspective, and I understand it, but I also think that you don't create work to simply enjoy yourself. You also have an end goal. You also would like as many people to be reached, to be affected by this work. I, as a marketer, would also like to reach as many people as I need in terms of my goals and my objectives. So our goals may be different in terms of, maybe it's, for you, it's not, the bottom line commercial targets, but it's the same. I think we all win when we all achieve our outcomes at the end of the day. But we have to pay more attention just to how discerning we are on either side. Sometimes we come together and it's kind of like a forced marriage that has to work no matter what, and that doesn't help, and it doesn't help the tensions, and it doesn't help the divide. I think we need to take the time to understand where the other parties are coming from, to understand the goal. And even if it means that, for this particular project, Slindile, I'm not able to work with you and your concept. However, I promise you, when I have a campaign that is, that fits the concept more, then I'll work with you in future. But it becomes difficult because artists are always placed in a position where I think they feel they have to grab what comes, because at the end of the day, you've got to eat, you've got bills to pay, and therefore economics come into play. And I think that's just horrendously sad. And I think that is a conversation actually that's probably fueling a lot of this frustration that's happening right here. So I think that both sides, we need to respect one another. We need to respect what we bring to the table, and we need to be honest with one another. If something is really not working for a particular project or a particular outcome, I don't think we lose anything from respecting one another's boundaries and respecting the work that's been created by an artist at the end of the day, and finding the right fit instead of us force fitting. Because like I said earlier, consumers are also not stupid. Consumers can see a gimmick a mile away, and they will let you know. So it actually doesn't help marketers to take advantage or to look for shortcuts with our artistic partners at the end of the day either.
Can I just jump in there? And I want to come to Monica next and then back to Cleo. But Phumza, if an artist has worked on a campaign and a project and he's gotten a brief and you come back and you say, it's not working for us, where is that middle ground? Because I as a journalist, I've heard horror stories where artists have poured their soul into campaigns and just to be last minute told that the campaign doesn't work. How do you reach middle ground like that? Because I'm sure there's honesty already, but honesty might work for you, but it's going to hurt my pocket if I've developed a campaign, or even a phone call on an hour sitting in 5 meetings is time, it's money for an artist who's looking for an income. So how do you then, the honesty role is fine, but is it not slow? Is the power not more with you because you control the purse strings? And you want the artist to be able to deliver on a concept, and they're working on it. They're spending hours in meetings just at the end of the day for the company to say, well, it's not a fit.
Look, I think this is something that needs to be understood and unpacked in the explorative conversations. It can't happen 5-6 meetings down the line. I think that's just poor. It would be a poor show of any marketer or business that has done that or is doing that. At Distel, we certainly would never do that. But I think that we've also had on the flip side, examples of cases where an artist feels slightly uncomfortable about, kind of going forward with the process for whatever the case or the reason may be. I depend on the artist to be able to do and to create what the artist creates. I'm not an artist in that respect. And so my sensitivities around the art and protecting the integrity on the art has to be one of my key priorities. And I think that, it helps, obviously, when you've developed a relationship with people. It makes it a lot more difficult when you're working with artists that are still a little bit green. But that is why a lot of corporates, and we certainly do invest in a lot of incubatorships with partners where they work with your young and up and coming artists so that they can understand the briefing process and understand some of the sort of the objectives that happen behind the scenes when they are creating their concept or their stories or whatever it may be. But I think there needs to be respect first and foremost on either side. In order for it, for things to progress.
Monica, let's bring you into this conversation quickly because you are a creative and a marketer, and you're now a CEO. Cleo talks about that the objectives fundamentally are very different. That businesses are about making money, and artists have a completely different understanding. Mariapaola and Earl talks about exploitation of artists and this idea that you can jump on a bandwagon just because an artist is hot at the moment and kind of that fit. Where do you sit on those positions? I want to come to Slindile's point about having created something and then trying to get to those levels. And I assume that people like yourself, Earl, and Phumza to a degree are the gatekeepers that she's talking about. But just your reaction to those points.
So I think this is a very, very rich discussion. And I think, as Phumza points out, is almost the start of a longer conversation. So I'm always a little uncomfortable with the notion of art as being dispossessed from its intention to reach an audience, whether that audience is your mum, or whether that audience is at a festival like the National Arts Festival, or whether that audience is bigger, because I do think that there is intent. When a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, did it actually fall at all? I think is a question that we need to ask. So it's certainly incredibly frustrating that, for example, we send university graduates, arts graduates out into the world with very little understanding about this world, about this language, about their rights, about the power dynamics in many ways. And certainly, let's be frank, there's simpler ways of selling sunglasses than through the arts, right? Yeah. Nobody who enters into this discussion with ourselves is necessarily thinking that this is immediately going to result in a sale. Very seldom does. So it's about understanding that kind of conversation and the extent to which, and this is very, very important, kind of brand alignment, is that if you're a brand that's nervous around free expression and that kind of stuff, we are probably not for you. Because we're not going to censor because your brand has a particular take on a particular thing, or because your brand is nervous of particular kinds of statements. So again, I feel like there's an educational element missing. I think that there's a joint responsibility between artists and marketers to educate audiences. And again, I think that we really do need to make the distinction between when we associate with a brand, what that means, and the obligations and rights on both sides. And I think that artists are exploited in this world because the contracts are unbelievably complicated and in many cases exclusive. And some of them, scarily enough, have morality clauses in them. Really? You're going to dictate how I live my life because I'm associated with a brand? I think that that's the kind of thing that we really want to try and avoid, because that, I think, is bad practice. But we're better off when artists have a very clear sense of what their audience is, and when there is a sensitivity from marketers and certainly brand experts to what it means for an artist to be associated with a brand. And one of the interesting things that we certainly find with some of the young artist programs is, are people ready to be associated in this way at this stage? Because it's a huge thing to do, to take what is an individual persona and then attach it to something else. And again, it's about responsibilities and rights. But yeah, so I'm not sure that I've necessarily helped, but I think that there is a nuance here that if we just create a polemic, won't be helpful. And just one short story. You know, Sam, I can talk. I'm a gold medal talker, but I came to the festival one year as an audience member and was invited to a French performance art piece. Women, fans, plastic bags. I thought, oh, this is going to be so awful. And at the time, I was a civil servant. So it was, okay, how do I back out of this gracefully without offending anybody? You know, it was the most magical thing I have ever seen in my whole life. But as an uneducated audience member, when I read the description, it honestly alienated me completely. So again, that sense that we know how to talk to each other and we know how to talk to audiences about what we present, I think is probably the most fundamental thing that we need to learn how to do. And with all due respect, I think that there are people who know how to do it. So this is not a universal kind of principle of people not knowing. I think it's just they're not necessarily given the opportunity to apply that knowledge very often.
Let me bring Cleo into this conversation. Cleo, you've kind of heard the input from the rest of the panel members, and you sit in a solo entrepreneurship space. And you're probably, I mean, not where Phumza is, where she's working for the big brand, or where Earl is, where he's with the international brand. You're kind of really, as a solo entrepreneur, really on the ground, in the business, in the day-to-day business of building a business. And I'm not saying the others aren't, but you have a very different context to it. When you hear about businesses not completely understanding, and like, for example, the way Monica was saying now, is that are marketers sensitive enough to the role of artists? is there enough education happening, and should education happen on both sides, not only from a marketer's perspective, but from an artist's perspective as well? And I know that we talk about that this is just the start of a conversation, but many people will argue that this is in actual fact not the first conversation, that there's been many on different platforms, that people as powerful as the panel that we have here have been in forums where this conversation has come up, and yet years later we're still having this conversation, saying that more conversation needs to happen and more education needs to happen, and yet we've all been part of conversations where we've said that. What is wrong with this picture? Who is to blame that we're still having the same conversation about marketers versus creatives? And then I just want to throw a second point to you as well. Professor Mark Ritson says that the idea that a marketer should be creative is baloney. In actual fact, he believes that marketers are useless at it. As a creative, do you think marketers are useless at it? So maybe answer the first point for me, and then just kind of bridge to the second point, that maybe the role of marketers is not to be creative on any level because they're useless at it.
Yeah, Sam, I think you're setting me up there with the second one. You want me to try and offend people. But I think with the first point, and maybe speaking to Phumza, I agree 100% that I think there needs to be 100% respect between the marketers and the artists. And maybe in the first statement that I made, where I spoke very, let's say, firmly about money and profits and sales being the objective of the marketers, that wasn't to insult or to be disrespectful, if that was the case. I think there needs to be transparency. We need to be sincere, and we need to be at spaces where we can be open and honest. I mean, that's always needed when two parties are working together. So like what Monica said as well, is I think definitely from an artist point of view, there's a lot of education required. Education, like understanding the economics of art, like Earl put in. We can't run away from the economics. There's a strong responsibility that businesses and government and various other funding agencies have towards creating these ecosystems for artists to flourish, and then at the same time, obviously, for businesses to flourish as well. I think earlier what I said was businesses' role in society needs to obviously step closer towards the people. So I'm not speaking about the artists now, I'm speaking about the people. And essentially what we need to understand, and what Mariapoala said, and it's very important, she just said that there's definitions where we need to stick to from a clarity point of view. And I think we can't be hypersensitized to me telling a marketer, your objective or your KPI is to ensure that your sales after spending 100,000 Rand on a campaign is to try, and obviously nothing's guaranteed, but try to ensure that there's maybe you're creating some advocacy, you're creating a narrative that people are starting to believe in your brand. So we can't be sensitive to those things. And I think all the points that all of the panel members made are extremely valid. I think maybe it just got a little from a semantics point of view. When money is spoken about, then people start stepping back and feeling offended. Can you just repeat that second part, Sam, please?
Yeah, just a Professor Mark Ritson in Marketing Weekly talked about how the idea that marketers can be creative is baloney. They're absolutely useless at it. And I just wanted to find whether creatives think that marketers are useless at being creative. I know that Earl said it at the beginning, that the problem here is that in actual fact, you've got marketers who are very creative in their understanding and are pro being creative. But I just wanted to hear from a creative, whether you think Earl is useless at it.
I'm sure Earl can. I saw in the beginning, I'm sure Earl can knock out some amazing concepts, or maybe even obviously expressions or something. But I think with what he was saying is marketers by definition are administrators towards the business role, and they're not there to create.
But let me push back a little bit, because one of the issues is that marketers set the brief. So if a non-creative sets the brief for a creative, is that not the problem? Possibly.
I think essentially, Another thing that Earl said, obviously, that makes a lot of sense, or that adds to this point, is that marketing obviously it's a very deep discipline, right? So there's a lot of market research that goes into these concepts. The concepts obviously aren't sucked out of uncreative marketer's brain. It's informed by stats, and they understand that this is the market they want to target. It's possibly understanding and maybe defining those roles between those two things. So this is our market we're trying to target. This is what we want to do. Are they creative? Do you want to do this? How do you feel about this? And then after that discussion is done and those lines are cleared up, the same conversation that we had earlier with understanding our roles, then we can move forward and I can execute the way I feel this thing should be executed. And hopefully, based on the fact that you came to me to do this thing, my message would reach your objectives that you've set out.
I want to come to Slindile, but Mariapaola put her hand up. And then, we started off talking about your initial reaction between just the idea that there's this divide between marketers and creatives. And I now want to talk about just a little bit more about this relationship. To Earl's point, though, if I'm a creative, if I'm Slindile, and Earl, to Cleo's point, if Earl approaches me and says, Sam, we need a campaign, you're creative, we need a campaign. We think you're the right fit. Here is 300,000 Rand in a time that I need 300,000 Rand. Am I not going to bend myself like a pretzel in order to come up with a creative concept, in order to have access to that money, even though all of you through this conversation has talked about fit, using the right artists, creating education programs for young artists, making sure that there's no exploitation. But if you throw enough money at me, even though as an artist, I know I'm not the right fit, I'm going to bend myself like a pretzel in order to make sure that I come up with a creative concept based on your brief, even though you're non-creative. Mariapaola?
I think Slindile had her hand up before me, so I don't know if she wants to go.
I love the fact that Mariapaola is fair. Slindile?
Love it. Okay, so this brings me back to the National Arts Festival and what they were able to do for artists during that time, where it reminded me as a creative, you need to learn how to pitch your idea so that the buyer or the person that has the producer will be able to buy into what you're really trying to sell. And this reminded me when we pitched as Mabo Art Foundation is a company that I co-own with a filmmaker. And this is how we bridge theater and film together in terms of being able to learn how to distribute theater into a wider audience by using the medium of film. So we were able to pitch that to the National Arts Festival so that Mabu became the service provider for the National Arts Festival, where we were able to show them the works that we've shot in the previous years, our archive of how we've shot works, because we pitched to them and said that, listen, I think we can help you guys with filming some of the works for the artists who also are coming on board, who are pitching their ideas. And the best thing with the National Arts Festival was that you weren't constrained to write a proposal. You were asked to pitch your idea and to speak about your idea. And I think that's how you bridge those, I don't know, that's how you find the bridge between both worlds, is that I get closer to you, I get closer to your human interaction of how you can show how I can get my idea and we can both get our ideas across to our audience. And I think that's exactly what the National Arts Festival was to me, was that it was a space where we could market together, where we could work together, and we could sell the product together. And at the end of the day, we understood our rights as artists, they understood their rights as the festival, and there was no bad synergy around it, is that everything was clear from the beginning of that what we are trying to do is sell the new works that are living in a virtual space, but at the same time, making sure that the National Arts Festival its product or face placement doesn't die out. We're still going to exist. We're still going to push to make sure that the branding of the National Arts Festival still is alive during 2020.
Can I play devil's advocate quickly? Are you not giving us a perfect example of where that works? Would that work with Earl? Would you be able to call up Phumza and say, I've got an idea for Sunglass Hut? A little bit earlier, you talked about the doors being closed, the gatekeepers at different levels. Is Earl's business model at Sunglass Hut and Phumza's business model at Distel, does it allow them for artists like you to just create and pitch ideas? Earl, could I ask that question again?
I think it's dependent on the marketer. I certainly have done that type of projects whereby we work with artists and I'm going, what's interesting in your world? What's the projects you're working on, right? So it's a two-way conversation. I know what my narrative for the year is. And so what I hopefully can do, because I've got a little bit of creative language, is to bring those two together. So I'm saying my story for this year is X. You've got this project, maybe not the right project. What's artist number 2? What's your idea for this year? Oh, okay. Oh, there's synergy. Not 100% a fit, but we can massage it, right? And so there are a lot of those opportunities, but it depends on the type of marketer, because the problem I find between business and the creative space is that bridge, which I call the language barrier, where let's say a numbers person try and speak in a creative language often is where things fall flat. That's why creative agencies often have account managers. The idea is keep them the two as far away from one another, and you deal with the noise in between, right? And so sometimes you find marketers that's a bit more sensitive, and they can bring the two together and they work with the artist. And it also helps if there's not huge egos in the room, because that's the other challenge now, is my idea is better than your idea, or you don't get to say how I should execute this idea, right? And then just the last thing on marketers, because, we feel a bit punch drunk, but the reality is marketers almost never make these decisions in isolation. We go sit in a boardroom, often with accountants, and we have to sell an idea, a creative idea, and put it in financial language, things like return on investment and all of that stuff. And then the person that signs that check is often not a marketer. So I think it's sometimes harsh to think that marketers are the gatekeepers. Sometimes we are, often we're not. And so there is this bridge that we sometimes have to play to get that project over the line.
To your point, Earl, and maybe this is where we could bring in Mariapaola, just the idea that, and I think Earl summed it up a little bit earlier, the idea of the starving artist. This idea, and as a journalist, I've heard many narratives around the role that government must play to create opportunities for artists. But here you've got a Slindile with a perfect example of where she's had to learn the ability to create something and then sell it. Are artists not copying out? Are creatives not always copying out and using this narrative that has been circulating in the media space for so long, that they're starving, that they're misunderstood, that there's a big bad world and they're innocent and everybody else is the bad guy? Marie?
Yeah, this is 10 discussions happening in one. So there's so many things I want to catch up. I'm going to try say it as short. With your last comment, I studied visual arts, and my only intention was to be a producing artist. That's all I wanted to do. And for the first 10 years of my career, I was a painter, full-time painter. I worked commercially and I worked for myself, and that's what I did. But there is another narrative at play, and the discussion is complex. And creatives of the 21st century are starting to realize that it's not clearly the starving artist. Yet you have to be true to what you think and what you believe. And the second, especially visual arts, and I think performance might be the same, the second you don't be true to your vision or your identity or your way of producing art, is the second you will lose the potential of building your career. So there is a strategy at play. And the idea that visual artists are just difficult is not actually true. If they are not true to their medium, their process, their vision, their name doesn't build over a 40-year career. So it is a very complex subject. But I wanted to touch on to what Phumza was saying about a brief, and then Earl also was speaking about it in Cleo. and the idea of a brief being given to an artist or an art collective that they follow. You know, I worked for the 7 years of the Colored Cube. We closed down last year, but for 7 years that this company went, I never responded with corporates to a brief. The work we were doing did not fall under a marketing brief. The way that I got the work was to pitch. And the way that we pitch proposals is that you meet somebody at an opening event and they say something, and then you say something and you're like, I'm going to find the connection and I'm going to succeed. And, you know, we won the BASA Awards because of these corporate partnerships that we created. But not for 1 second did I assume that we had the same agenda. The corporate is trying to achieve a goal that is linked to ROI. And that's what they're trying to do. And that has to be accepted by the creative. The creative is trying to do work that they feel is fulfilling. They can meet each other. And often, and I agree with Phumza completely, when it works, it works. If it doesn't work, the creative has to say, I need to walk away. I want this job, but it doesn't fit with my ethos or my intention or my vision. And that's okay. And I just wanted to, there was one other thing that when I was studying at Henley, the first day of our studies, they asked us to go into our groups. And there was finance and marketing and, I don't know, all the other corporate departments. And then there was government. And then there was creative. And then there was entrepreneurs. I was the only creative in the whole group. That was that cohort. And I was the only entrepreneur. And in those 3 years of working very closely with a team of people from different, almost all, there was one government, but all corporate backgrounds, well, that was their career. It was so interesting to me to see what the value that creatives could give that creatives, I believe, aren't aware of. And that is the creative process of how creatives think, how creatives process to get to the final idea. The focal is always on that final painting or that final production. But the actual interest that creatives could add to corporate is the way that they think in order to get to that final idea. The way their innovative processes of risk-taking, of experimentation doesn't exist in the corporate sector. And if that value chain starts to be brought in, where creatives are not just the people who need money, and corporates, when they have money, they work with creatives, but actually realizing the value that creative thinking can add within the business sector, I think this conversation would go much further, because it's always about the artist needing money and the corporate having the money. It's never about the artist having the innovation, the risk-taking, and the further thinking and experimentation that the corporate might need. So the bridge is always seen as one silo, when there's actually quite a few ways that we should be connecting and we should be engaging with each other, that both the creative has to realize, to Monica's points about training, engagement, business training in the creative sector, as well as the corporate realizing we could solve more problems that you're facing than you realize.
Monica,
I hope that makes sense. I was rushing, so I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, we are running out of time, so I'm going to ask everybody just to move through their points quickly. But just your reaction to Mariapaola, and then also factor in for me where we currently are, because I love what she's saying, but it feels like a distant, far-reaching goal that unless corporates really see it, and I'm going to argue that they don't, and I'm going to say that creatives, to all your points, that there's some creatives know and some don't, and those that do know. To Maria's point as well, that now with COVID, we aren't physically connecting. We are not having those little side conversations that connects you to the next project. And if you're not clued in, if you're not tapped in, you're missing out on opportunities. So just your reaction to that. And then after Phumza, just maybe in closing, just to give us a sense of where to from now, but just your immediate reaction to Maria. Monica?
Sorry, apologies. Just finding the mute button. I think that there's a really interesting moment in time to deal with your second question first. And Slindile pointed to it very sharply. At the National Arts Festival, when we faced 2020, we had no idea what to do. So of course, we reached out for help. And we said, anybody with an idea, come and we'll chat. And I think that the pandemic has shifted relations to the degree that we all are in a learning space. And as a result, we should all be a lot more open to each other's views than we've been in the past. Because what we used to do is the festival, we'd design a festival, and then we'd invite people to come and populate spaces that we had on the festival platform. But that's changed. And even now in 2021, our entire modality has changed. So, and to Mariapaola's point, I think that the fundamental question is that I think creativity exists in every frame, in every domain. And there's a person at Home Affairs right now who's creatively dealing with their workspace in order to be better at their job. And I think that we should respect the fact that everybody has the opportunity to bring creativity to the table. It's not just the purview of somebody who happens to be titled a creative. But I think that the question of process then becomes absolutely fundamental, which is to say that we're not responding to a brief, we're responding to a conversation. And I think that's really where Mariapaola's point about finding the commonality rather than the difference then becomes absolutely essential. And it has to be shared. It can't be one of us deriving the bulk of the value, whereas the other person doesn't. And that's, again, I think we have a very unique moment in time to really actually shift practice at the moment. So I'm kind of hopeful. Maybe I'm just a stupid optimist, but I'm really hopeful that we can actually start to solve this decades-long argument with the space that we're in now.
Phumza?
Sam, I think that, like I said earlier, the landscape, the consumer landscape is changing. The corporate landscape is changing. Look at how many corporates, how many brands are now activating things like purpose marketing, cause marketing, to try and resonate on a deeper level with consumers, with the public. And I think that a marketer operating in this day and age would really do himself or herself a disservice if they are not more empathetic and more sensitive in how they meet their goals. Yes, we have financial directors that sit in a corner that we have to be creative and motivate along KPIs and ROIs and all those things. But the reality is, by virtue of a changing landscape, I'm also going to say I'm very optimistic that a lot of these tension points that we are debating should get better, because marketers will be forced to be more sensitive. And I do hope that we are able to address some of those underlying issues that put pressure on artists to a point where they feel at times they are exploited for a concept or an idea. I hope that we are able to address those issues so that we can work in our different areas of disciplines, but work together. That's what I'm most interested in. And I think that over time, it will get better.
Cleo, to Phumza's point, she's saying that marketers should be more sensitive. Should creatives be more sensitive to the ROI?
100%, Sam. I mean, not sensitive. I wouldn't use the word sensitive, but I think definitely when we spoke about the education component, we essentially want to work together. So the creatives need to understand the objectives that the corporates need to fulfill, and if that is the ROI, then we need to understand how to achieve the ROI. But at the same time, especially when you're dealing with an artist, the corporates need to understand that the artist's best output is going to be in a space and a style where he's allowed to be sincere and not to. I don't like the word sensitive that much, but I feel like it's about sincerity. It's about creating and being, and not creating and being for financial return, which might sound now contradictory, but creating and being from a natural expression point of view.
Slindile, and after Slindile, we'll start with Earl just to get to wrap it up. But just to talk about, just final question. I mean, you've given a perfect example of where there was this there was this call from the arts festival saying, come with your ideas. Just listening to everybody around the table. If there was a creative now saying that, listen, I have an idea, I have a fit. What do you think you did right with the arts festival that you sometimes struggle with a corporate structure?
I think with the arts festival, it was an easier platform because I'm dealing with as well creatives who are artists, and they get the format of what we're trying to do. But what I started to realize when you get more into the corporate space, it's more about you're not an agent, or you're not seen as an agency, or you're not seen as a creative agent. You just come as a creative who has a business platform, or who creates content. And it becomes a thing of that, how do I now get to become the agent? How do I now get to that agency? How do I now get my company to be put on that list? Because clearly there are so many lists to get to. So it's just about really understanding the language, and understanding how do I tap now into a market where First for Women can push for what I'm also trying to push for example, if I can drop names like that. And to get to a space where I can pitch the same way that I pitch to National Arts Festival, I can pitch to them in your spaces and show you how we could do it and how we can all do it together type of.
Earl, I'm going to ask you we're going to do a 30-second wrap with everybody, but Earl, just very, very quickly for me, what we didn't talk about, and to Mariapaola's point, there's just so much to touch on in this short space. And this is really the start of a conversation. But we didn't talk about shared value models, how corporates have actually changed and how they have really looked at the impact they have in not only in a value chain, but simple things like, for example, supply development programs that they've put in place. And some of these supply development programs do incredibly well to unearth new talent, to bring new business into the procurement space and all of that. But just to our initial point, when you think of the role that a brand like Sunglass Hut can play in this space, do you think, honestly, you guys are doing enough? Do you think that you're obviously going to say there's room for improvement, but do you think you're doing enough?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the first one. There's always room for improvement. This is such a long conversation, so I'm going to try and I'm also a talker, and we a whole lot of talkers, but what I want to say to you is the challenge you're always going to sit with is this fight with ROI while you're trying to do, let's call it your responsibility part, right? Seth Godin spoke about the connection connection economy years ago. It's more relevant now. We live in this moment where we have social distancing and mask and all of that. And the arts is such an important part right now to bring people together through storytelling, right? It cannot be, I really feel passionate about that particular point. The challenge, like what Slindile was saying, is people go with what they know. The challenge you're going to have is monetizing your art because you're not an agency, right? You don't have the network. Nobody's going to trust your credos in the strategy space, even though you've got an amazing creative idea. There's so much work that needs to be done in the, let's say, the hand-holding and education of bringing amazing creatives along. Because to be quite honest with you, there's a lot of crap that comes out of agencies because it became a money-making machine. There's a plug-and-play model, right? And so the true art is where it's going to be. This is not going to be solved overnight. I know we're trying to grab for that silver bullet. I can tell you it's going to take years. But I can also say this, that conversations like this hopefully will start. And I know we said, yeah, there's a lot of conversation happening, but I think it hasn't been focused enough and it hasn't been with the right people. And I do believe that just from a Sunglass Hut point of view, I've always believed that if you can create a fan today, whether that's an artist or a consumer, word of mouth remains the strongest way of marketing. If you say something good about my brand to somebody you love, they're going to trust you more than anything I could ever say, right? And so if we make real art and you are able to put that art out, you're going to touch people, and that people will eventually come back. It may not be in 12 months. So I won't get my ROI in year one, but we will create brand fans over a long period of time if we build the relationship. And so there's a lot to gain, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Maria, 30 seconds.
Yeah, so, I really think that the thing that I'm focusing on now, after having a company, and just quickly, Slindile, to what you were saying, at the Colored Cube, I used to have a success rate of 1 out of 10 proposals that we sent out there. 1 out of 10 success rate. So you get out 10, you get 1. So we used to apply for 200 things and get, but in line with this conversation, I'm focusing at Constitution Hill, I'm focusing on what types of ongoing support structures can be put in place that can develop the creative economy for the next 10 years. So that these kinds of discussions, these kinds of partnerships with brands, with governments, have a place to come, have a way to have an engagement. So, to me, the development of support structures for creatives with low-income studios, with access to Wi-Fi, access to computers, access to capacity building, entrepreneurship workshops, how do you register your business, all of these things will go a long way to start building the sector so that governments and corporates have an idea of how big the sector is and how they could benefit from the sector. So to me, the conversation we're in now is 2 steps ahead. I'm focusing on what kind of support structures can we put in place to grow the creative economy so that they can have the space to thrive in their creative ideas. And then hopefully we bring on board governments and corporates.
Monica, 30 seconds.
So I agree absolutely with the points made, which is to say this is a long-term journey. And I think that it is in the recognition that we want to build bridges, that we will find ways around. And there are going to be brands and amazing companies that get it, and there are going to be those that don't. And we need to find a way to really create those spaces where these kinds of conversations can happen elsewhere. And the extent to which we understand each other more must actually be a deliberate exercise. Not just we hope they get it, but actually making sure that we touch base with each other and understand each other and agree that partnerships are mutually beneficial. Thank you.
Phumza, 30 seconds.
I think it's a useful conversation to be had, and I'm so glad that I was part of this panel today. And I remain hopeful. I really, really do. I think that for all sorts of reasons that I've mentioned, changing landscapes, dynamics changing, we need one another, and we need to come to some sort of understanding with understanding that there will always be those tensions as we try to create, as we're trying to win the hearts of our consumers, and you artists are trying to win the hearts of their audiences. There is a common goal and a sort of a common a common outcome that we're all striving for at the end of the day, which is to make things create things that are memorable, create things that move people, and to sort of take society and grow society and enrich society. So I think I'm very, very hopeful. I remain optimistic and will certainly be doing my part better. Are we doing enough as a corporate? I think, like Earl said, there is always room for improvement. But I think that we are well on our way to something quite positive for the long term.
Slindile?
I think the word is partnership, to more of those, to more honest relationships, to understanding both worlds. Because I think as a collective, we can really shift our society as a whole. And I think it's just about really being honest with one another about those budgets and about where we can go together as a collective. I mean, it's going to take a long time, but I also have hope. I have hope that I'll get into those boardrooms one day too.
Cleo, final word to you.
Yeah, I think just two points from my side. I think the first thing, like Slindile said, honesty is probably going to be one of the most important things for both parties, and then obviously understanding what the objectives are of this partnership, just to direct things. And then with regards to what Earl said with the hand-holding process, I think that's a very important point to raise regarding how creatives engage with business. Sometimes there is those challenges, but like you said, with supplier development programs and those sort of things happening, I think from a strategic point of view, businesses, I think that's potentially the solution for businesses to create these incubation type of spaces where they're nurturing these artists, or they're creating a space for artists to nurture their talents, but then also creating those educational opportunities where artists can move out and understand, obviously, the changing landscapes better, so that the outcome can be more effective.
Thank you very much for your insights and your time. And I must say, this is the nicest group of people I've ever had the pleasure of having a panel discussion with. I'm not sure if you're going to WhatsApp each other dirty words after this, but I'm amazed at the insights, and I'm will even argue that there's more creatives on this panel than there are in actual fact marketers. So thank you for your insights. I'm not going to add anything more. Mariapaola, Monica, Earl, Phumza, Cleo, Slindile, thank you. And I'm sure that people that have watched this will find this insightful and maybe want to engage with you one-on-one just to get more insight and see what you guys are currently doing within your organization.